outline of our presentation. First of all, we shall look at why female labor force participation in the first place. Secondly, then we shall of course look at the theoretical basis of the study to say where did we borrow the theories. And again, we shall move on to look at the methodology of the paper. Then we shall move on to the empirical results. And finally, we shall give the policy recommendations emanating from the study. So, first of all, let us take a look at the country profile, Malawi. You know, every time I travel and I'm in conferences and I tell people that I'm from Malawi, over 80% of the people I've met who are not from Africa, they ask me, where is Malawi? So that is why I thought I should give you a picture as to where Malawi is. Malawi is somewhere in the southern part of Africa. We squeeze ourselves between Mozambique, Zambia, and Tanzania. So Malawi has got a per capita GNI of about 320. That was $320 US. That was as of 2015. The population is roughly around 18 million right now, and the workforce is at about 79.6%. But before we celebrate to say we have got a higher workforce, you should know that 11% of that particular workforce is formal. The rest is informal. And again, the land area is about 118, and we are basically an agrarian economy. To say we rely much on agriculture. And we only managed to meet 4 out of 8 Millennium Development Goals. In terms of poverty, poverty rates are really high because about 50.7% of the population lives below the poverty line. And for your information, out of that particular population of people that is poor, 57% are women. So at least we can see where now we are going. Women. When I was introducing myself to the chair there, he was like, I was expecting a presentation from a lady. So that's where now we are going. We are now looking at female labor force participation, but in relation to tax policy. Now, in the year 2017, the World Economic Forum made a sweeping statement. They predicted that it would take about 217 years for women around the world to achieve equality in the workplace. 217 years, 2 centuries, almost impossible. And here are the statistics that they actually came about with. So in the year 2016, for us to actually globally to close the gender gap, it would need us about 83 years. Last year, that is 2017, they estimated again to find out, they predicted again to say it got worse, we would need a century. In terms of the equality at the workplace, in the year 2016, they said we would need about 170 years to actually achieve equality in the workplace. But in 2017, just last year, things got worse to the extent that it moved from about 170 years, now it would need us about 217 years for us to achieve that. So, ladies and gentlemen, we have a problem. And the problem is worsening. If we don't do something about it, then something bad will really happen, especially to women. That is why I asked myself to say, we know that fiscal policy is a critical instrument to actually, much as of course we use it to actually collect the revenues, but again, what can we do, or how do we spend the revenues, or how do we tax in such a way that we correct this particular problem? Now, this is a global problem. How about in the instance of Malawi? What is the situation? So in Malawi, most of the female labor force participation is informal and precarious. By that, we mean that if you look at the wage employment, or in terms of the females, it is only at 29%. And you find that agricultural labor is at about 81%. Fine, we say Malawi is an agrarian economy, but we know that agricultural labor does not really give enough income to actually uplift the welfare of the women. And in terms of casual labor, which in our vernacular language we call ganyo, it is at 76%. Now, what do we mean when we say casual labor? Casual labor is that type of labor which is like just piecework, and it is not regulated by the labor laws. So I'll give you an example. In my case, there would be like a woman who would come maybe on Saturday or Sunday just to wash clothes for me and clean the house, and I give them something. That's casual labor. It is not regulated by the law. Now, the problem with this particular casual labor is that people use it as a food or income poverty coping mechanism. It's just hand to mouth. You give them a little something on a Saturday, they go and eat and they go back. The next weekend they are there again asking for some piecework. So in terms of women, we are saying 76% of the female labor force participation in Malawi is casual labor. Now, again, as I pointed out, women are overrepresented in the poor people. That is at about 57%. And overall, female labor force participation is at about 88.1%. And this is higher compared to the average of the sub-Saharan Africa. So, should we celebrate to say, wow, Malawi has got a higher female labor force participation compared to the sub-Saharan African average? No. Because as we said, when we now go to the realities of the female labor force participation, you see that much of it is casual, and much of it again is agricultural, which cannot really uplift the people out of poverty. Otherwise, you find that the very same casual labor now is pushing people further into destitute. So we need to do something. We need to worry. That is why that guy, that friend of ours there is worried. So we really need to worry. Now, as I said, we say the female labor force participation in Malawi is higher than the sub-Saharan African average. So we should actually know that it's not just a matter of adding the numbers to say, oh yeah, we have got the higher female labor force participation rate, but it is the diversity, the gender diversity, and the quality of the female labor force participation that actually matters. And for your information, as I pointed out, Malawi failed to meet 4 of the 8 Millennium Development Goals. And one of the goals that we actually failed to meet was goal number 3 of the MDGs, which actually states that there should be gender equality and empowerment. So Malawi failed to meet that particular goal. When you go deeper into that particular goal, you find that one of the key objectives was to actually achieve 50% representation by women in the wage labor. 50%. But when we were finishing when we were completing the MDGs, we had only achieved 29%, just about 30%. Right. Now, why should we focus on female labor force participation? So female labor force participation is very important. It is important in the sense that it boosts productivity. Not only that, of course, it also increases the intra-household bargaining power of women. You know, when a woman has got money at home, at least much of the income or that women earn is spent on healthcare, is spent on kids, is spent on food. And most of the times we find that we men, when we have got money, we go boozing and all that, and we just bring back a little something, just the change out of that. So that is why we are saying female labor force participation is important, because the income is used for household bargaining power, again, as for the welfare. And again, IMF in the year 2013, there has been interest again from IMF on female labor force participation lately. And they actually found out that gender gaps in entrepreneurship as well as in labor supply actually impede economic growth. Now, a question to you, dear beloved, or a question to us all. In Malawi, has the fiscal policy really done enough to promote gender equality and quality female labor force participation? Let's take a minute and look at such kind of things. So, on that particular picture, you see, I would describe it as a typical poor household, or typical poor people who are there now fetching water. So they go to, we call that a gamble. In English, what do you call that? Or at least you go and actually you have to actually fetch water from the well, not even a borehole, but from a well. And there they are helping each other to actually get the water. And this particular water, we know, has to be used at home by the kids, by the fathers, by the men. Who is doing that? Women. This is work. This is work. But is it accounted? Is it accounted for? Again, let us look at that particular picture. Those are our colleagues. I would also describe this as a typical poor setup. Here you can actually see that these are school kids, and behind them is a school, supposedly a school block. And the question comes back to us again. What is fiscal policy doing to actually help such kind of people? Now, would you expect such kind of kids to grow up and really contribute to the economy? No way. Now, before I proceed, I'm a very patriotic Malawian, so I'm not trying to actually paint a bad picture about Malawi. So you actually bear with me on that one. Now, having asked ourselves those particular questions, let us now move on. What are now the study objectives? In this particular study, we actually tried to assess the determinants of a woman supplying labor. Supplying labor in the three main forms, whether it is wage labor, casual labor, or agricultural labor. And again, the other objective was to actually identify how tax policy can now be used to boost quality female labor force participation, while at the same time enhancing the livelihood of the women, and again, ultimately achieving gender equality. What's the significance, what's the rationale of doing this particular study? We thought that by doing this particular study, first of all, we would actually inform pro-poor fiscal policy making, as well as pro-gender fiscal policy making. Not only that, this particular study would also actually raise awareness such that the CSOs, the civil society organizations, would be empowered to actually undertake evidence-based advocacy, especially on the relationship between tax, labor supplied by women, and gender. Now, what was the theoretical basis of our study? Where did we borrow the theoretical underpinning or the theoretical foundation? We have what we call the neoclassical theory of time allocation, which was championed by Baker in the year 1965. This particular theory actually simply tries to model labor supply vis-a-vis leisure, to say every human being at his or her disposal has leisure or labor. So he or she chooses to work and earn something, or can choose to go by the leg and relax. That's in simplest form, the neoclassical theory of time allocation. And Munoz in the year 2007 attempted and successfully attempted to actually contextualize the issue of female labor force participation in this particular theory. And again, in the year 1977, another study again by Grunau, they attempted again to extend this particular conventional labor supply and consumption model to include home production. So let's pause a bit. You remember when I was showing you the pictures, I said these are our ladies trying to fetch water. It's part of work, but it is not accounted for. So in this particular theory, again, Grunau in 1977 attempted to take that on board by including home production. And that would now mean that taking into account women's work and into the market work. Fine. Again, this particular study again rests on another theory that is also called the human capital investment model. This particular model simply posits that education, skills, and experience that are invested in a human being give a competitive advantage to that particular human being in such a way that his or her earnings in future would be high. So a very good example is we go to school. The very first aim that we actually go to school is to actually be on maybe we should working and earning some decent income. So basically that's that. Fine. Having looked at the theoretical basis of the study, let us now move on to the methodology. What did we do to actually achieve the objectives that were set? So we used what we call the multinomial logit model. The multinomial logit model actually models the probability of a person, or in this case we'll be talking about a woman. So it models the probability of a woman participating in the three forms of labor: wage, agriculture, or casual. And why did we choose the multinomial logit model? This particular approach was actually chosen because we actually found out that there are several unordered responses of choices. So, wait a minute, what do we mean by that? As I go on, I'll show you that with the data that we used was household survey data. So household survey data, as an enumerator, I would go to maybe a household and ask them, okay, like for the past 1 year or for the past 2 years, what form of labor did you engage yourself in? So they'll be, okay, fine. So they'll be recording. They say, okay, fine. I engaged myself in some agricultural labor and I got so much income. I also did some casual labor and I got so much income. So they would not order them per se to say, first of all, I'll put one agricultural labor, 2 casual labor. No. That is why we opted for this particular methodology, and that's what we mean by the second point there. So the female labor force participation was actually treated as a variable that actually attempted to look at the individual and family level decision. So we regressed a latent variable, female labor force participation, on various demographic and socio-economic characteristics like age, status of poverty, marital status, household size, etc. And down there, we have the simple model that we actually used. And as I pointed out, the FLFP, that's the female labor force participation, was treated as a latent variable. By latent variable, we mean that the female labor force participation was not observed per se. But within that, we have got 3 main decisions or choices that were made. So under that, you'd say, okay, fine, this one participated in wage labor, this one participated in agricultural labor, and the other one, okay, fine. So that's what we mean by female labor force participation being a latent variable. And the X represents now, it's a vector of the independent variables, the one that I've just mentioned there, the poverty status, the marital status, etc. And the beta there represents the coefficients of each and every variable. Now, take note again that in labor economics...
3 minutes.
Okay. In labor economics, there are 2 main approaches, or there are 2 main things that we should take note of. One can actually supply work. One can actually decide to work or not to work. And in another case, one can actually decide how many hours of labor to actually supply. So we actually used the approach of to work or not to work. And we also moved on, of course, I think I cannot actually share the paper with anybody who might actually have the interest, but actually we also noted that we also used the random utility model, because in that particular instance, we actually noted that there would be some labor choices which would be actually random and some systematic. So that is why we actually also did that. So we used agricultural labor as a base, and the coefficients were interpreted according to the relative risk ratios. And as I pointed out, we used secondary cross-section household survey data that was obtained from the National Statistics Office. And this one actually, in this one we had about 26,777 female respondents. Now, a summary of our results. We did all the necessary diagnostic tests, and you can actually refer to them in the main paper if you are interested. Now, what were the key summary of results? We found out that when a woman is poor, they are residing in a rural area, they are uneducated, and they are household head, they are more likely to participate in casual labor. as well as agricultural labor. And on the other hand, we also found out that when a woman is residing in the urban area, and again they are in the age group between 30 to 45 years, and again they have at least primary education, they are likely to participate in wage labor. Finally, let us look at the policy recommendations. From such kind of findings, what are the pragmatic or what are the practical issues that we can actually take from there? So first of all, we actually propose, or we actually recommend that rural women, and especially those that are heads of the household, they have to be targeted. Maybe you can use like the direct cash transfer, so that is to say maybe you can actually have the tax policy, or maybe the revenues, you can also have an allocation being given to such kind of women as direct cash transfers. And again, you can also target such kind of women with agricultural input subsidies. And again, it is also important to invest in the girls, as we saw on the picture. It is very important for us to actually invest in the girls, because we can actually see that education, the moment somebody has at least primary education, they are likely to participate in wage income. At least wage income can actually enhance their livelihood. And again, we are also proposing that tax revenues or incentives, they ought to be used to guarantee decent work, that is wage employment, to say we should actually focus on wage employment. And we can also use targeted fiscal expenditures. That is to say, we should actually ensure that maybe in rural areas, people should be able to access water easily, not like what we actually saw. So we can also use fiscal policy or tax policy to actually achieve that. All in all, and in conclusion, this particular study actually calls for gender-just policies that actually should bring flexible working hours to women, and most importantly, again, should actually empower them. Ladies and gentlemen, that's the end of my presentation, and thank you so much for your attention.